You've probably heard the 4% rule again and again. Have $1 million pull $40,000 a year, and you're supposed to be set for life. But research out of Morningstar found something almost nobody talks about. Most retirees never come close to spending that much. They sit on the money instead, and it's not because they're being stubborn. There's one number that actually decides this, and most financial channels skip right past it. If your total portfolio is less than 25 times your essential expenses, once you've added a real long-term care buffer on top, spending more isn't a mindset issue. It's a math problem. Get the order wrong and you could be a decade away from a mistake there's no undoing. Here's the part nobody explains. Everyone online tells you to give yourself permission to spend. What they don't say is that with valuations stretched as high as they are right now, with the CAPE ratio sitting above 30, pushing your withdrawal rate past 4% can move your odds of running out of money from around 4% up toward 15% or 20%. That's according to Karsten Jeske, the retirement researcher known as Big ERN, whose safe withdrawal rate work is what the 4% rule was built on in the first place. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the exact decision tree that tells you whether you're actually oversaving or whether your caution is the one thing standing between you and a long-term care bill that could wipe out everything you spent 40 years building. We start with the 25 times rule that most of the industry never slows down long enough to explain. Let's put a real number on this. Say your essential bills, housing, food, and Medicare Part B at $202.90 a month add up to $45,000 a year. Social Security, with the 2.8% cost of living increase for 2026, covers $30,000 of that. That leaves a gap of $15,000 a year your portfolio has to cover on its own. Multiply that gap by 25, and you get $375,000. That's the number that has to sit in your accounts just to cover your bare essentials for life, using the same math behind the 4% rule. But here's the piece almost nobody adds in. Long-term care isn't optional to plan for, it's just unpriced until the day you need it. A realistic self-insurance buffer for that risk runs around $300,000 on its own. Add those two together, and your real safety floor isn't $375,000. It's $675,000. If you're sitting on $700,000 and you've been quietly calling yourself a hoarder, you're not hoarding. You're exactly where the math says you need to be. Financial planners have a name for this exact number. They call it the identity protection line, the point where your portfolio covers every essential bill plus a real health emergency, no matter what happens next. Below that line, caution isn't a personality flaw. It's you protecting your own independence. Here's why that long-term care number matters so much. It isn't like a market downturn, where you can just wait it out. It's a bill that can show up late in life and stay for years, and it doesn't care whether your portfolio just had a rough quarter. Financial media loves to shame retirees for underspending, but almost none of that coverage accounts for the risk sitting quietly on the other side of the ledger. Here's the honest trade. Holding money below your floor buys you protection. Holding money above your floor doesn't buy you anything except worry, no matter how good it feels to watch the balance climb another year. If you're the kind of saver who's been told you're too careful, but you're actually just protecting your own independence, that instinct isn't a flaw. It's the exact reasoning this channel is built around, using math to defend caution instead of shaming it. But here's the flip side. What if you're not at $700,000? What if you're sitting on $1,500,000 and you're still eating at home every single night out of habit? Maybe you've told yourself you'll loosen up once the market feels a little safer. The market never quite feels safe enough. And that's the real cost hiding on the other side of the floor. At that point, the math stops being about protection. It starts being about how much life you're quietly leaving on the table. Here's the decision tree I use with people who feel stuck between fear and permission. Step 1. Calculate your floor. That's your essential spending gap times 25, plus your long-term care buffer, the same math we just walked through. Step 2. Find your surplus. Whatever sits above that floor is money the math has already cleared for spending. Step 3 is the part most people skip, building a small, automatic habit around actually using that surplus. None of this is complicated math. Most people can work through steps 1 and 2 in an afternoon with a calculator and their last few bank statements. The hard part was never the arithmetic. It's giving yourself permission to act on what the arithmetic already told you. It rarely takes a professional to walk through it, just an honest half hour with your own statements. I used to tell everyone to stick to a 4% withdrawal rate no matter what, full stop. I was wrong about that. For someone with a paid-off house, a pension, or the Social Security bump that came with the windfall elimination provision and government pension offset repeal, 4% is often too conservative. It just builds a pile of money you'll never actually spend. I've sat across from retirees who have more than enough sitting in their accounts and still order the cheapest thing on the menu out of habit. That habit served them well for 40 years. It doesn't automatically know when to stop. Take a retiree with $2 million. At 3.9%, that's $78,000 a year. At 5%, that's $100,000 a year, an extra $22,000 to actually live on. An extra $22,000 a year sounds aggressive until you realize it's the difference between a retirement spent watching a number on a screen and one spent actually living in it. Run the numbers, and the risk of running out only moves from around 5% up to 10%. That's because their floor, the essential and long-term care number, is already so well covered that the extra spending is coming out of true surplus, not out of safety. The honest cost of staying at 3.9% forever isn't safety. It's a wealth pile that just sits there until someone else inherits it and pays the tax bill you could have avoided. That's real money that could have paid for grandkids' plane tickets or years of dinners out together, gone instead to a bill nobody chose on purpose. That's the quiet cost of confusing caution with permanence. That's the 2% habit. Not a full lifestyle overhaul, just a small, automatic increase you let yourself take once the floor and the surplus are both confirmed. Think of it less as a budget change and more as proof that the floor is real. It's small enough that it doesn't feel reckless, and consistent enough that it actually gets spent, instead of just admired on a statement. There's also a tax rule active for 2026 that quietly rewards you for spending more instead of less. And most retirees are too nervous about the IRS to ever use it. For 2026, anyone 65 or older gets an extra $6,000 deduction, $12,000 if you're married and both of you qualify, on top of the regular standard deduction. It phases out above $75,000 in income for a single filer, $150,000 for a couple. Most retirees know that number exists. Almost none of them are using it the way it was actually designed. Here's the trap. So many retirees stay so far under the 12% tax bracket that they never use the room this deduction creates. They treat every withdrawal like it's dangerous, when in some years, pulling out a bit more and paying almost nothing in tax on it is the smart move, not the risky one. The same IRS update that set this deduction also raised the 401k catch-up contribution limits for 2026. Proof the system keeps adjusting for people your age, not against you. Here's the mechanism behind the inherited IRA problem most people never see coming. Required withdrawals don't ask whether the person receiving them already has a full-time job and a mortgage. They just get added on top of whatever income your kids already have, pushing the whole thing into a higher bracket for as long as that 10-year window lasts. Play this forward two ways. In one version, you hold everything back. You pass away with $2 million still sitting in your accounts, and your kids inherit an IRA they have to empty within 10 years, often while they're still working, and in a higher bracket than you'll ever see again. Close to 30% of that money can go straight to taxes they didn't have to pay if you'd spent more while it was still yours. Picture your daughter opening a letter from the IRA custodian the same year she's already stretched thin on a mortgage and a car payment. That's not a hypothetical. That's exactly how the 10-year rule plays out for most families. In the other version, you use that $6,000 deduction while you're alive. You take a withdrawal that's already shielded from tax and you spend it on something real, a family trip, help for a grandchild, whatever actually matters to you. You're not gaming the system. You're using the exact deduction Congress built for people your age. That deduction doesn't roll over, and it doesn't wait for a more convenient year. Once your income moves past the phase-out, money you could have pulled out at close to zero tax starts costing you real dollars instead. If the math says you're safe, why does your stomach still drop looking at a $5,000 travel bill? If the math checks out and you still can't bring yourself to spend more, that's not a discipline problem. For 40 years, your brain learned that success looked like the number going up every year. Now the plan asks you to watch it go down on purpose, and your brain reads that as a loss, even when it's exactly what the money was for. There's a real reason for that. For most of your working life, a rising balance meant safety. It meant options if something went wrong. Retirement flips the entire model, and no amount of spreadsheet math undoes 40 years of your brain treating a bigger number as protection. It's okay to feel uneasy about that. You spent decades being the responsible one, and that same instinct is what got you to retirement with real options in the first place. Nobody's judging you for wanting to watch the balance keep climbing. That reflex kept you safe for a long time. It's not a character flaw. It's just a habit that hasn't caught up with a new set of numbers yet. Maybe that shows up as checking your account balance more than you'd like to admit, or feeling a small flash of guilt after booking a flight you can clearly afford. That reaction isn't broken. It's just outdated information your brain hasn't caught up on yet. Here's a small shift that works better than trying to talk yourself into spending more all at once. Don't touch your main withdrawal number. Instead, take the 2.8% cost of living. Increase your getting on Social Security this year, and route just that piece into a separate account, one you think of as spending money instead of savings. Say your Social Security comes to $30,000 a year, like in our earlier example. The 2.8% increase alone comes to $840. It's money you didn't have before, so spending it doesn't feel like touching the pile you worked so hard to protect. It's a small trick, but it works because it doesn't ask your brain to unlearn 40 years of habit all at once. It just gives you new money to practice on. Give it a few months, and spending that piece stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling normal. Small as it sounds, that's often the difference between a plan that only exists on paper and one you'll actually live. But none of this matters if the market falls apart the year after you start spending more. So let's stress test it. What actually happens to this plan if we get a repeat of 2008 or 2022? Picture two retirees, both starting with the same $1,500,000, both taking 5% a year. In year 2, the market drops 20%. The first one keeps spending the exact same dollar amount no matter what, because that's the number they picked on day 1. They end up selling shares at the bottom just to cover bills, and the damage compounds for the rest of their retirement. The damage isn't just the 20% drop itself. It's that every dollar sold at the bottom locks in a loss that can never recover, because that money is gone from the portfolio before the market has a chance to bounce back. That's called sequence of returns risk, and it's one of the biggest threats to anyone taking a fixed dollar amount out every year, no matter what the market is doing. It's less about the market being bad and more about bad timing meeting a rigid number. The second retiree is using a guardrail instead of a fixed number. When the portfolio drops 20%, they pull back discretionary spending by 10% for 1 year, just the extras, not the essentials. In dollar terms, that's the difference between pulling the full $75,000 in a down year and pulling closer to $67,500 for those 12 months. Historically, the S&P 500 has taken about 2 years on average to recover from a downturn like that. 1 year of restraint is usually enough to get through it without permanently damaging the plan. That's the whole difference between a rule and a guardrail. A rule breaks the moment reality doesn't cooperate. A guardrail bends for a year and then lets you go right back to spending the way you planned. The entire point of building guardrails into the plan is deciding this calmly in advance, not during the downturn itself. That's a completely different experience than trying to make the same decision while your statement is flashing red. Most people can accept a temporary pullback. Almost nobody can think clearly about it while they're watching the number fall in real time. If part of what's holding you back is wanting to leave something behind for your kids, there's a way to do that, which actually saves you money while you're still alive to enjoy it. Here's exactly what to do with all of this. None of these 4 steps takes more than an afternoon, and together they cover the entire gap between feeling anxious about your number and actually knowing it. First, calculate your own safety floor. Take your essential spending gap, the part Social Security doesn't cover, multiply it by 25, and add a long-term care buffer of roughly $300,000. That's your number. Write it down somewhere you'll actually see again, not just in an app you forget to open. Second, make sure you're actually claiming the $6,000 senior deduction on your 2026 return if you're 65 or older, $12,000 if you're a married couple who both qualify. Confirm your income falls under the phase-out limits, $75,000 for a single filer, $150,000 for a couple. Third, check your Social Security statement. With the windfall elimination provision and government pension offset now fully repealed, some retirees who spent their careers in public service are seeing their checks rise by hundreds of dollars a month, sometimes more, and a lot of them haven't even noticed the bump yet. If your household includes a teacher, a police officer, or a federal worker, this is the step most likely to be sitting there unclaimed. Fourth, pick one thing this month and automate it. Take the 2.8% cost of living increase from Social Security and set up an automatic transfer into that separate spending account we talked about. Let the system do the deciding instead of your gut. Small as it is, this is the step that turns a floor and a surplus from an idea on a whiteboard into something you actually feel in your day-to-day life. You worked 40 years to get to this point. Don't let a fear of what could go wrong take the place of what's actually true about your numbers right now. None of this was ever really about the 4% rule. It was about knowing exactly where your safety floor ends and where your actual life is allowed to begin. Most retirees never draw that line, so they keep guarding money they already earned the right to spend. If you've done the math, if your essentials are covered, your long-term care buffer is funded, and there's real surplus sitting above that number, the research isn't asking you to be careful anymore. It's telling you it's safe to go live the retirement you built. That's not permission to be reckless. It's permission to stop treating every dollar above your floor like an emergency that hasn't happened yet.